Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Nimzo-Indian Masterclass. This video is going to cover 4 knight f3. And this, of course, occurs after knight to c3, bishop e4, and now knight to f3 by white. Now, this is known as the Kasparov system. It was very much popularized by Garry Kasparov, and if you look at the database, indeed, there are many games in the early 2000s, late 1900s, where Garry Kasparov is playing this setup as white against some of the top players of that time. And so this is a very high-level way to play the Nimzo-Indian as white, and it definitely takes a dedicated video of itself to tackle as black, and that is what this video will do. Now, what we're going to play here is d5. This is consistent with the other videos in this masterclass that I'm making. We very often are going to employ, and as you've already seen, we very often did utilize indeed this light square setup striking with d5. So we're going to continue with that immediately with d5 here. And we're actually transposing, by the way, into a Rogozin type structure where white is starting with knight to f3, we play d5, and then they play knight to c3, and then we play bishop e4. So you can arise, this position can arise from many different openings, but formally we're going to come to this position from 4 knight f3. So we play d5, and there's really a number of options we're going to look at. The first thing we must consider is by playing d5, we're opening up this diagonal, and therefore in this position and in some other positions, queen to a4 is very much possible. And I haven't looked at this move at all in this masterclass, and so I'm going to take this opportunity in the 4 knight f3 video to really tackle this move, because it's a very bad move. 99% of the time, it's just losing time and allowing for black to have really quick play. So we're going to tackle queen a4 here in this video. We're also going to look at what happened if they take. We're going to look at what happens if they develop this bishop g5, with the idea of later going e3 and developing all of their pieces to the maximized position. And what if they play e3 immediately, trying to get a quick development for the king side to match our quick development on the king side. So let's begin with bishop to g5. And we're going to play h6 and really pose an immediate question for them. What are they going to do? Now, bishop takes f6 is indeed pretty common. We're going to look at both this and bishop to h4. Let's begin with what happens if they take. We're going to take back. And here, let's say they play e3. They're trying to continue in their strategy of simply developing. What we're going to do is castle, which makes total sense, queen to b3, and c5. Very often, defending this bishop, you don't want to do it with the knight too early, because we want to use this c-pawn in some way, specifically usually with c5, sometimes with c6, but we usually want to use this c-pawn early in the game, and so it's better to defend this bishop with this pawn here. And indeed, we're following a game of 2500s, and so we can look at what they do. The bishop took here. I'll show you this game. It's very natural development. Bishop to d7, rook to c8, coming to the most juicy file in the position, clearly with the queen here. And the knight develops. We have bishop takes c6. We have rook to c7, which is a sneaky way to try to over-defend this pawn and perhaps stack rooks on the c-file. We have bishop to d5. The rook comes to c2. We have now a5 to hit the queen. And ultimately, black got a very nice advantage. Their rooks got very active. They traded into an endgame where they're up just an enormous amount of pieces. This queenside pawn majority is undeniably very powerful and very difficult to fight against. And in just a couple more moves in this position here, white finally threw in the towel because of the not only strong pawn mass here, but the more or less inevitable mate on h7 as well. So after h6, as a reminder, we looked at bishop takes f6. They can also play bishop to h4. And here, what we're going to do is take the pawn. Very often by playing d5, as you've seen in this series so far, our idea is to take, so later we could expand with tempo when they recapture inevitably with the bishop, and therefore get some development. So here, this is definitely the move that we're happy to play. And for example, after e3, we don't only need to wait for them to take, we can over-defend it immediately. And now we're going to follow another game, and you can see how what black can do sometimes is hang on to this extra pawn in a way which does not weaken or compromise their position. And of course, if we can do that, that's perfect. The other thing I do want to highlight here is this move g5, which, if you've never seen this sort of position before, seems incredibly strange. Why are we weakening our kingside? Well, one of the things and characteristics with the bishop coming to h4 is this move g5. You always want to be prepared and open-minded to play this move, because their king is here, so they can't start launching an attack here. We're going to have equal chances to attack them, and what we're doing is getting rid of the pin. We're now being able to utilize our knight, for example, in some cases to win a pawn, in some cases to harass the bishop further, and we're getting good control over the dark squares. And so it's a great positional move to consider. And here in this game example, again, among very high-rated players, it indeed won black the game. You can see that black can comfortably castle into this sort of position because the weaknesses are just insignificant when considering everything else. And here, of course, the bishop is hanging because of this fork, and mate will soon follow as well. So going all the way back, that is one of the possibilities. Not the only, however, and in fact, after h6, bishop to h4, when we play pawn takes on c4, they can now try to go for the check. And we're going to cover this check a bit more strongly, you could say, in the dedicated section of the video where we first look at queen to a4 check. But just to quickly show you one of the ideas, we obviously defend the bishop with the knight, and the reason this queen is misplaced here is because the bishop lands on d7, and we're going to stop here just for right now, but there's some crazy, beautiful tactics that can happen. And again, I will momentarily show you these tactics in a couple more minutes in this video where we get to that dedicated portion. But what I'm trying to show is that throwing in queen a4 at a random stage won't change the situation, and it will still give us good chances. So that's bishop to g5. Now, they have, of course, many other options. They have the move e3, for example. Now, we're going to castle. They develop their bishop, and now we take. Now, that's a big distinction to make. If you take immediately, they can develop and capture back in one swoop. And so what we want to do is to castle first, force them to move, and then take back. And now, if we attack them later, or if we don't, we leave the bishop here. Regardless, we've gained time. We forced them to move twice, while we've done a very productive move by castling. And so after white were to castle, we can take, and here, after something like e takes, a6 with b5 coming, and then bishop to b7, you can't argue that black is not very happy. We have good space. We're totally equalized. The rooks are coming to the c and d file. The knight has a very clear path up the board, either landing on c4 or on d5, and the queen can sit on e7 where it's very strong. I will show another game example here. What happens if they take with the knight? Now, it doesn't change the position too much. We're still going to follow similar plans of controlling these files and developing with these pawns and developing like this in a natural way. But I just found a very instructive game that I wanted to look at, so we'll look at this variation they have. You can see black playing the exact same ideas that we talked about, expanding on the queen side with the pawns and things like this. Bishop to f4 to trade off their strong bishop. Again, the rooks are fighting for the critical c and d file, which are the open files, and definitely the important ones in the position. And you can see, again, this idea of g5. We have an endgame here where black is certainly fine. You can see black is making good progress on the queen side. You've already seen that multiple times now. Usually the queen side is going to be our strong side in this opening because of those opening moves where we expand there, where we develop, for example, the knight with an eye towards the queen side. We're very much playing on the queen side and trying to solidify our king side, ironically, by pushing the pawns up. But as I've explained and shown, that's not weakening them. It's actually giving us good dark square control. And indeed, here, white resigned in view of the fork that happens if they take, and otherwise their pawn is lost, and we have many, we're controlling the board very heavily, so we definitely will be able to continue proceeding in this position if they do not take. Okay, that takes us to now queen to a4, which is perhaps the most fun variation that they can give us because it's just a horrible variation for them and a very exciting and energetic one for us. So queen to a4. After we play d5, they give this check. We play knight to c6, of course. And our idea is very simple, as we've already hinted upon earlier. Bishop d7 to x-ray this queen, and then the tactics will flood in. So for example, e3, bishop to d7, and here, if they do nothing, let's say they play h3, then suddenly we're winning. You can either take here first, followed by taking here on d4, unleashing the attack on the queen, or you could even play knight takes d4 immediately, attacking this queen, and if they take, we have this beautiful fork. So some very beautiful ideas in the position if they give us this x-ray, and therefore they're going to most likely move their queen, but now they just moved their queen multiple times while we just developed our pieces. And sure, this isn't the best development. I mean, I talked about how I want this c-pawn moved before the knight lands here, and I talked about how I perhaps want the bishop on b7. It's not the best development, but it's development nonetheless, and certainly the knight can later move and allow for this c-pawn to march, or the bishop can then land on c6. In fact, we can show you a quite quick variation after castles. Bishop e2 we can take, and then the knight can indeed move, and then c5, and like I said, the bishop can come to c6. The opening is a very flexible time. You're not putting your pieces there forever. You always can change, and so if they let us develop at all, that's a win. Really, regardless, except in extreme circumstances, regardless of where the pieces actually land. And as the arrow suggests, the rook comes to the c-file. We can always take over here and open up the position further. We're very happy. The final move that we're going to look at is, of course, as always with d5, they can take. We're going to take back with the pawn here, and now we're just going to look and kind of compare what happens if they do the exact same things that we looked at. So we looked at e3, we looked at bishop g5, and we looked at this check. What if they do these same moves after first taking? Now, generally, there's not a big difference, but there is some small minor things that, if anything, worked better for us. And so, for example, after bishop g5, h6, if they were to take, now the nice thing is our queen has more flexibility. It can swing over to the other side. So, for example, queen to b3, we don't have to defend with the pawn. We can go queen to b6, suddenly setting up some nice ideas where after a3, we can either take, followed by bishop f5, or as happened in a game, we have this beautiful idea of going bishop a5, and if the queen moves away, then bishop f5, where after queen takes, of course, we have this very dangerous idea for us. And so in the game, they repeated for a little bit, ultimately traded off some of the pieces, and this was actually a very beautiful game, so I'll show you some more continuations here. Rook f5 specifically is one of my favorite ideas that can be illustrated from this position. You want to activate the rook in a very creative way, always something to look forward to. How do I get more pieces involved? The knight hops in. We have a trade, and after king f7, our rook is very active. Their rooks on the c-file are staring at dust, and we can always stack the other rook in a very similar manner as well. So, and our knight is better than theirs. So, generally, very fine position for us. So that is what happens if they play bishop g5 and take. We have more flexibility with the queen. They can still play bishop h4 here, but after something like castles, bishop f5, takes, and knight b to d7 followed by c6, no complaining that we can do. Again, g5 is a possible move in the future, one that is very common and typical and thematic to these sort of positions. The knights can very much land over here on c4. The bishop can re-centralize and regroup to the center. If they ever attack it, we don't have to take. And we're definitely, certainly not worse. In many cases, we're fighting for a positional advantage here. Okay, and that takes us to the next move. Instead of bishop g5, let's say e3. This again doesn't change much. We go rook e8 after castling, bishop g4. We're just developing, and our ideas are very similar. Again, we don't want to develop this knight typically we don't want to develop this knight before moving this pawn. So here the correct appropriate way to defend this bishop is to develop the pawn to c5 and then later go knight to c6, and you can certainly imagine some very dangerous ideas for them with this pawn mass here. So that's definitely one of the common ideas. And other than that, it's just not a dangerous position. It reminds me of a Caro-Kann sort of structure where it's just very calm in nature. It's not identical to a Caro-Kann, of course, because of the fact that they have this e-pawn, but it's just very calm. You're developing your pieces. The game takes a very positional turn, and on the positional, in regards to a positional stance, we're certainly not worse. So we're happy to enter this sort of positional battle. And then the final thing is c takes and then queen to a4 check. Doesn't change anything. Knight c6. I will show something else. Of course, if they play e3, we have some of the same ideas with bishop d7 later and things like this. But I want to show you actually some other cool ideas we have, one of which is to overprotect this bishop, freeing this knight, and then baiting them into taking this extra pawn. But by doing so, their queen gets misplaced terribly and in some cases trapped. And here, for example, after queen a7, we have queen to c8, looking to further harass this queen. And even though we might not win it, if they play perfectly, perhaps they can save their queen. They're going to have to sacrifice something else, either some time, and we can use that time to win this fork, things like this. I mean, are just, look, all of our pieces are out. We're castling next. Their queen is stranded on a7, and they're nowhere near close to castling. So we're very happy. And that is it for knight to f3. It's not too much of a unique or distinct option. It's very often just going to be paired with e3, which we've already seen many times through the move e3 itself on move 4, or it's going to be paired with bishop g5, which you will see in a future video, or it's going to be paired with this check, or they're going to I mean, the options are very plentiful, and our responses are not too specific, but as you could see, they're very effective. I mean, white wasn't given any sort of advantage. Black got very comfortable position. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you are new around here. Like this video if you did learn something new from it and want to see more content just like this. And I will see you next time. Peace out.